Let's see the other members, because Olivia is one of our panel members. Let's go to the second panel member. We go to Istanbul, Turkey. Good morning, no, it's good afternoon already in your case. Bulent Alkanli, he's the managing director of Perseus. It's a sourcing office based in Istanbul. He already has a very long experience of working with American and European brands, and he's an elected board member for more than 7 years of the Turkish Clothing and Manufacturers Association. Welcome, Bulent. And now we go to Bangladesh. Yes, we see the lady. Good morning, good afternoon in your case. Nazma, how are you? Good to see you in this panel. She is director of the Bangladesh Institute of Labor Studies, and it's one of the, perhaps the only labor institute of Bangladesh that really endeavors to uphold the rights of working people and trade unions. And the third gentleman on the right, you see him, is Jeremy Lardeau. He joins us from Barcelona. He's the president of the HIC Index of the SEC, and before that he worked with Nike and also with PricewaterhouseCoopers. So we have a lot of knowledge present in this panel, and that all has to be done in 15 minutes. Can you imagine what a challenge that is? But let's start with the first one, Bulent. Having this experience that you have, this extensive experience from Turkey and in your different positions, working with brands, etc., what is the key aspects, what are the key aspects of the supplier-brand relations where you are worried about?
Well, thank you very much, Pierre, for the introduction. And hello, everyone. It's good to see so many faces right now, 265 participants, which is quite a nice figure. I don't have 3 pillars and 12 focus areas. I only have 2 pillars and 3 focus areas. I believe it's going to be shorter. What I would like to say is that as a manufacturer, our experience has been actually in 2 different frames, or with 2 different glasses, let's say. The first frame I would like to mention is the COVID-19 pandemic period, which we can look at maybe with sunglasses or black glasses for the blind people. It has been a roller coaster for all of us during that pandemic period, and should be kept separate as from the conventional purchasing practices. I read a quote during the early days of the COVID that was saying that what has been built over the 20, 30 years in the ethical world has been destroyed in 2-3 weeks, to which I don't agree. There has been a damage done, but I believe that the related actions have been taken quite fast as well. So what I more focus on is the conventional purchasing practices, which we can briefly explain as aggressive price negotiation, inaccurate forecastings, short lead times, late orders, last-minute changes. Now, out of these all difficulties or hurdles, I will be talking about only two and a half of them, let's say. The first one is basically the cost price and aggressive negotiation in prices. According to the survey made by ILO in 2016 in 1,500 factories in 87 countries in 28 different industries, it has come out that in 2015, 39% of the factories that were questioned has had to accept orders below cost price. That's a significant number, and that's a huge impact. So there is a missing margin that the chain has to somehow reflect onto each other. If the manufacturer is not getting the margin he requires to make a living or to sustain, then that missing margin has to be taken out from somewhere. It can be the worker who is working in the manufacturer, or it can be not necessarily that there is going to be a pressure on the worker, but as a manufacturer, for example, I will put then pressure on my fabric supplier or on my trim supplier. And that is causing a further effect on the rest of the industry. Workers may get their salaries, but then 10 years later, they will realize that their social security has not been paid during that period.
And your
Now,
second
this is
issue?
the first point. And the second point, and the last point, Pierre, for the last 30 seconds, is that 52% of the factories have accepted a lead time that they knew from the day one that they were not going to be able to achieve because of the pressure that they were getting from the brands. So basically, my experience is that has an effect on the workers and on the value chain as a total has been these two cases.
Okay, and that underlines the importance of including this pillar of commercial focus areas into the Industry We Want project. Thank you, Bulent, and we will come back to that later on in the panel. We go to Dhaka. We already saw her, and I already presented her. Nazma, you live in a country where there is a lot of textile industry. It's a very, very important industry for your country. You heard about the different focus areas, and you saw that there were 4 mentioned under the pillar social regarding wages, social protection, collective bargaining agreement, and access to remedy. From your view, if I would analyze these 4 elements for social elements in Bangladesh, what is the picture at the moment?
Thank you, Pierre, giving me the floor. Let's talk about the wage first. Actually, Bangladesh does not have any national minimum wage standard. We have only sector-based minimum wage. Thus, more than 85% workers of the informal sector do not fall under coverage of minimum wage. Also, there are notable differences among the 42 sectors which minimum wage have set. In 2018, in Bangladesh, RMG workers minimum wage reviewed, and the wage fixed in Bangladeshi taka 8,000 taka, which is equivalent to $93.4 per month. This research identified that for the decent living of workers, a monthly amount of $332 required for a 4-member family. In that reality, we need faster progress towards a decent minimum wage as well as living wage for RMG workers across the nationwide labor sector of Bangladesh. Talking about the social protection, social security and protection mechanism for garment workers in Bangladesh is very limited. The absence of social protection mechanism causes the production worker to fall under the poverty line as immediate impact. The law has provision for guarantee, gratuity, provident fund, compensate for termination and closure of factories. But in practice, many workers because deprived of those rights. COVID-19 crisis clearly signifies the importance of establishing institutional mechanism for workers' social protection. In terms of CBA coverage, we see from our grassroots level experience that almost all employers are not in favor of trade unions. While under pressure, they tend to represent participation committee and safety committee as a substitute of trade unions. We want to clarify that trade unions are only legal entity to raise voice as well as bargain with employers for workers, while the other structured in the form of committees do not have the legal provision. National and sector-based trade unions are basically participating in the collective bargaining process, but the very limited extent of collective bargaining agreement shows that very few workers are benefiting from this. The tripartite stakeholders, employers, trade union, and also our government should coordinate among themselves and scale up the collective efforts. Finally, talking about access to remedy, it is not only limited here in Bangladesh. The picture is more or less same around the South Asian countries. Still in Bangladesh, most of the RMG workers does not know about the legal and social rights because their education level is not that much high, and they do not have enough opportunity to join unions. In addition, limited number of labor court and long due cases create less interested among general workers to even ask for remedy. Easily accessible and less bureaucratic approach to access to remedy for workers should be the first focus. I hope the industry we want can help in some way to accelerate the changes in these issues.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Nazma, for this very concise summary of the situation in Bangladesh on the four social areas that were already mentioned by Olivia. Thank you. Let's go to Jeremy. Jeremy, we saw these different elements of environment that are part of the pillar environment, the four areas. How can these different areas, how can they drive change in the industry?
Yes, thanks. Well, I would say the metrics and having these areas defined by the industry we want can be fundamental in two ways. The first one is to allow to track progress. It's a tired quote, but it's so true. Even at the industry level, you can't manage what you can't measure, right? And the industry is under a lot of scrutiny, and rightfully so. And at the same time, there's a number of different sources for environmental impacts at the industry level that put the industry's impacts in very different orders of magnitude, depending on who you ask, right? And that's because we don't have a good single source of reporting of the industry's environmental footprint that would allow reporting over to the broader stakeholders and tracking progress, right? So I think this is an incredibly important step in understanding, number one, what are the key impacts we want to measure, and number two, having industry-wide tracking on these impacts in order to align the industry and the broader stakeholder on where we're at and where we're going. A good example of that would be, for example, the annual textile exchange report on preferred fiber usage, right? It has been going on for several years, and it has become sort of the single source of truth for the industry on who uses.
You refer to, yeah.
Yeah, for the industry on who uses preferred fibers at what levels. Yeah. And it's a great source of information, but we lack that in other areas of the value chain. This is focused on raw materials. And we don't have that for example, global greenhouse emissions of the industry or global waste generation of pre-consumer and post-consumer waste. So I think this is an open space and one that I certainly hope the industry we want can address. And it would be a really important step for the industry to align around these metrics. Okay. And so the number two area in which these metrics can be fundamental is health focusing efforts, right? We have very ambitious targets as the industry, as individual brands, retailers, manufacturers. You have the science-based targets. We have circularity targets that are very ambitious. And unless we are aligned as an industry around specifically what it is that we're going to try to achieve, we have no chance of succeeding, right? So we need fewer metrics of progress, but better metrics of progress. We need to reduce the dilution of efforts across a myriad of initiatives to focus on the ones that truly matter. And I think the Industry We Want initiative can help us align at the industry level around these pillars and have a more aligned focus of the industry, between the retailers, the brands, the manufacturers, and the various actors along the value chain.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Back to you very briefly, Olivia, because everybody in the last 75 minutes is talking about the industry we want, and everybody mentioned that, but to what part of the industry are we focusing on?
Thanks, Pierre. I'll be very brief, just to kind of narrow down on what we mean when we say industry. We did have a number of very interesting conversations about the scope. The supply chain is long and complex, and the life of the garment is everything from agriculture to when it's in the waste bin or wherever else it goes afterwards. And measuring the impacts of that is obviously going to be a different exercise at each stage. So just to say simply, we are going to start by focusing mainly on manufacturing, on the manufacturing stage, with some flexibility around that according to the indicator. But in terms of breadth, just to reiterate, we're looking at going large, going broad, and really trying to generate these indicators that will tell us how the industry as a whole is doing. But we are starting with the narrower focus just on manufacturing.
Okay, thank you. Bulent, this is the block where we talk about the industry we want. You are very much aware of the problems and the issues we have to deal with, but I'm sure you also have a view on what to do to really improve it.
Yeah, I mean, basically, first of all, I'd like to say is that I would like to have an industry where everyone in the value chain has a good sleep at night. We don't want to wake up from troubled sleeps and find ourselves converted into an enormous bug like George Gregor Samsa. In many cases, we find ourselves like that, or at least we feel ourselves like that. So what we need in the total value chain is actually equal value distribution. And that equal value distribution across the dots in the supply chain is only going to happen by having equal contracts that protects either party. Susanna Mochilenkova, if I spell it correctly, has made a comment about how often manufacturers flag out that impossible task that they are putting on their shoulders. I would say it's almost impossible because of the power imbalance between the buyer and the manufacturer, and also because the current contractual terms are only one-sided, and they are basically not much protecting the rights of the manufacturer. Now, I have read interesting quotes about the industry I want made by the workers. And I can relay and put myself into their shoes as a manufacturer, and I can say the same sentences. If you're talking about fair wages, living wages, we have to talk about fair contracts, fair prices, living prices. So that's basically what I would like to see.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your brief statement. Let's go to some two final brief statements. Nazma, from your side, you already referred to the social protection issue in your first intervention. What is the way? What would be for you the one or two key elements that the industry we want should be striving for, looking at it from your situation from Bangladesh?
Thank you, Pierre. Actually, in terms of in Bangladesh context, we strongly feel social protection for garments workers. It is actually higher demand for the crisis of of the COVID-19 situation. So that's why in that area we need to work together. You know, in our country, a central fund was established for the RMG sector in 2019 to ensure socio-economic support in 3 ways. They are providing financial assistance to RMG workers and their families, healthcare support, and stipend for child education of the workers. But the access ratio is only 0.3%. During the COVID-19 crisis period, thousands of workers lost their job as an immediate impact, but the functional attitude of the central fund was missing. In that reality, we strongly feel actually social protection institutionalized system is needed in our for our country, and we need joint action of all parties to be coordinated with the lead of our government if we really want to see a sustainable and decent world of work.
Okay.
And industry you want, yes, and I'm taking another 1 minute. Actually, we strongly believe brands and buyers have equal responsibilities with government, trade union and employers to ensure workers' rights and voice. The industry we want is a global and influential partner that provides a great space for all stakeholders to come together who are truly thinking about an ethical and sustainable garment industry for the globe. With the support of this platform, we can work together with all stakeholders group that are thinking about an ethical and gender responsive garment industry in an inclusive way to uphold the rights of workers for industrial sustainability in a long run. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Nazma. Thank you, sister, for this further explanation on what is needed for the industry we want. Jeremy, one last question to you, because the word alignment has been mentioned a lot. It's alignment, it's collaboration. It came also out of the first Mentimeter question. If we look to your experience with collaboration and what is the key things, or what are the 2 or 3 key things to do to get this alignment or collaboration on environmental issues from the ground?
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's a crucial aspect of this. There's a myriad of initiatives. This is an industry that is rather dispersed, right? I mean, there's a huge number of brands, of manufacturers from small to medium to large, and it's a very dispersed industry. So we need I would say, less new initiatives and more convening of the existing initiatives, which is what the industry we want can help do under these fundamental pillars. I think one area where the SAC would like to contribute and collaborate with the industry we want is in setting foundational levels of expectations on environmental practices at the facility level, right? And under these 4 pillars, we can set that and align on that, such that there's a consistent approach across the manufacturing countries to set a basic compliance level, or above compliance levels of environmental practices, from which we can then build upon and go to beyond compliance initiatives that are already sort of swirling, but don't necessarily permeate the full breadth of the factory landscape.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to all of you for participating in this panel. There are a few points that I picked out. One, the importance of measuring the different focus areas. So because these measurements, these metrics, they can track progress and give also focus on what we are doing. Secondly, and I think some of you already expressed that very clearly, it's about equal, fair partnership for all parties in the supply chain. So an industry where everybody benefits, and where, as it was mentioned by some of you, this relationship between brand and supplier is very, very important. And the third thing that I pick up is that you can talk about pillars, you can talk about focus areas, but the way the reality of a specific country influences the perspective, and also the way the situation in that country really differs. So it's good to take into account very specific situations on the ground and not talk only in general terms.